Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well, and this week, surprisingly, once again, I'm going to talk about Destiny 2.
Boy, have you lost your mind, cause I'll help you find it.
But instead of talking about or discussing what's going on with the game right now, I've been kind of thinking more about the future. And if anyone's been following my channel and my videos recently, I've mentioned more than once that
I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time.
I kind of foresee my time with Destiny, how do you say it, coming to an end once the final shape has ended. Time for me to move on. I'm going to force Ghost onto the next, the next series, the next franchise, whatever. This is because I was afraid of committing myself to another decade of seasonal content that I didn't really see the appeal of. Another long-term saga in the same universe, on the same planet, with the same characters, shooting at the same enemies with some slightly different versions of the same guns. But now, Bungie has kind of vaguely, for obvious reasons, announced some of their plans for what's going to happen after the final shape. They're calling them episodes, and they're apparently chunky seasons. So forgive me for being, a negative Neddy here.
Daddy, chill.
But given that a lot of the complaints around the seasonal model can be kind of boiled down to the sparse content delivery stretched really thin over a year, and this fear of FOMO that just takes over when players are required to constantly play the game in order to feel like they're keeping up, why will this new episodic model be different? If we have even larger stretches of time between episodes, and considering Bungie in recent times have indicated the team is pretty stretched, as it is right now, can we reasonably expect them to be able to deliver more? An important caveat here is that we still do not know whether Bungie intends on continuing their yearly expansion drop cadence alongside the new episodic structure. If the case ends up being that there are no yearly expansions releasing to bolster the community with a swath of new content once a year, I'm not really confident the new episodes will be exactly what the community is looking for. More so, even the potential idea of us losing the yearly expansion spells a lot of trouble on the horizon for Destiny, because the yearly injection of hype, players, coverage, and cringe was really important for the game over the years. Will players be excited for just more episodes? And of course, this kind of goes without saying, this is all speculation, because A, I have not played or seen basically anything from the episode structure other than the same screenshots you have, and B, it's kind of hard to imagine that Bungie would abandon yearly expansions. I mean, both from a player expectation level and from a financial point of view. I imagine if there's no expansion coming in the year after the final shape, players could probably expect that there's actually something even bigger coming down the line, and it's not really a reason to despair. I mean, if there's no expansion in, February 2025, my bet's on that Destiny 3 or something new is coming. But what are we doing here today? What's the point of all of this? Why are we here?
Just to suffer.
We're here because I hopped into my gaming apocalypse bunker and just tried to imagine what Bungie would need to add to Destiny 2 to get me nice and hard. Excited about Destiny 2. Weirdly enough, thinking of these 5 ideas was really easy, and I'm very thankful, because editing these videos takes so long and I really don't have time for this shit. But I digress. What would I like to see? What do I need for Destiny to drag me back in for another few years after the final shape? Okay, let's start with an easy one. Some low-hanging fruit for my short kings out there. A restructured core playlist system. Never heard that before, I'm sure. And you're probably wondering what I mean by it. And you're correct. It means a world without Gambit.
Got him!
Nah, I'm just kidding. In an ideal world, we would have had Gambit being updated alongside its 2 playlist brethren the entire time. But sadly, that ship has sailed a long time ago, I'm afraid.
Robert, it goes down.
No, it don't.
It do go down.
Oh!
And it's time to cut the cord on Drifter's Grift and move into the sunset for with whatever's left of the Strike and Crucible playlists. Recently, Joe Blackburn has highlighted they're creating a sort of X-Men team for the Crucible, which is pretty cool, I guess, but you have to imagine the pressure they're under is pretty intense, probably a little overwhelming at this stage. It's gonna take more than some nice community Twitter videos, X-Men, and community support hotlines to get this one over the line. If I harken back to my early multiplayer experiences with Bungie, with Halo 3 mainly, and think, what about those times would I love to bring back to a modern day Bungie multiplayer experience? It's kind of, you can boil it down to two things. A proper ranking system with cool cosmetic rewards, and a bigger variety of modes with more customization. Also a functional sandbox, please. Also, can you imagine how cool a Destiny 2 Forge would be? Jesus Christ, that would give this game so much longevity. Just give it legs to stand on, I think is the phrase. But yeah, I don't think Destiny 2 has the infrastructure for that as it stands. But, sticking to the ranking and the reward systems and the custom game modes, if I think back, I can remember seeing the really rare recon armor or the cool samurai sword in Halo 3, the Spartan armor, and that alone was enough to just want me to grind.
Stupid!
To play the game. Obviously a lot has happened since those days regarding microtransactions and cosmetic items, just the gaming industry in general, but I think the sentiment holds. If I saw some really cool Crucible armor ornaments, glows, banners, titles, I don't know, just cool stuff, I would be so much more enticed to grind it out each year. Right now, in the competitive playlist, there's just a mediocre sniper rifle with a low drop rate. This ain't it, Chief. I really think Bungie should just simplify and roll things back a little in that department, and it could probably benefit the game so much.
Slayer, Juggernaut, Oddball, Capture the Flag, Infection.
It's alright,
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
Okay.
You were the chosen one!
That shit is crazy. I really don't like that guy.
Okay, even if that was a little tongue-in-cheek, be honest, which set of those modes brings back stronger memories for you? The answer for me is 100% Halo. Even though I've put way more hours into the Crucible in Destiny 2, the associations I have with Halo multiplayer is just insane. I can still remember being 16 years old, sitting with my Xbox 360, just bombing around Sandtrap with a horde of random zombified Spartans and some of my friends just sprinting after me in a game of Infected. As I was driving away, I could feel all the excitement and the adrenaline and the giddiness when one of the Flood players would get close enough to me, invade my comms due to the little proximity chat feature they had, and I could just hear all my friends just growling and screaming and pretending to be monsters as they hunted me down. And it's been 15 years since that, and I can still remember it so clearly. It's such a fond memory. And there's nothing really in Crucible that's come even that close. Most of my memories, when I think back about Crucible, are just kind of frustration. Getting pissed off about cheaters and Trials of Osiris, or Trials of Osiris not existing in the game, the swap to 4v4. That's not to say I don't like Crucible. I do. It can be really fun, and the way it works with the randomized roles and the ability to build a very personalized character in a PvP game is really cool. I just feel it's not living up to its potential. It has the tools, it has the toolbox, and it has the playground, but it's like someone just threw away the key. Destiny 2 gunplay is insane. It's the best. Bungie are actually, as of now, pretty regularly adding PvP modes to the game, but they just don't really seem to hit right. Some of the more recent announcements like Relic or Checkmate modifier are promising and have been received really well, but the road is long, and there's a long way to go. Well, of course, Crucible is but 1/3 of the core playlist offerings. We also need to speak about strikes. Comparatively, strikes are in pretty good shape, I would say. I mean, they don't need nearly as much work as the Crucible seems to, in my opinion. Recently, there's been some nice inclusions to the playlists. Strike scoring, the addition of seasonal activities like Battlegrounds. The problem with strikes, for me, lies more in that it has kind of inevitably begun to feel stale. I'm not excited to play strikes like I was, Jesus, 10 years ago. We've been hopping into more or less the same playlist and just mindlessly grinding enemies for a decade, with no real major gameplay alterations to freshen up that process. Destiny 1, as you've probably heard thousands of times by now if you've been a member of the Destiny 2 Strike community, they added strike-specific loot towards the end of the game's lifespan. Something people still yearn for, something that kind of came back to bite Bungie in the ass a little.
Sometimes we have to tell them, like, we shouldn't ship this because it's an over delivery that is going to set us up for failure on future trains.
It's just so overset at this point.
But I think it would be cool if they added that.
They need to add some freshness to the strike experience. We've just been overplaying these encounters for so long that it's kind of insane, and if they can just come up with a way of altering the experience, it would be really cool and would add so much longevity to the playlist. I mean, just speaking out my big thick ass right now, what about some roguelike choices between encounters like we saw in deep dives for optional, ability empowerment, optional enemy types? I don't know, some randomization of enemy types, which we have seen a little bit, maybe the inclusion of rare optional bosses with extra loot and higher difficulty for the players who want that. Or, if we want to get really spicy with it, maybe the opportunity to be invaded by Dark Guardians in a temporary PvP encounter for some intense team play against human components. Human components? Human opponents. Perfect. Nailed it. But what do I know? I'm just literally a guy. And the final key component of the trifecta of core activities is Gambit. Honestly, Gambit had a lot going for it, and I think that Bungie could really push the boundaries of expectations currently present within the PvE, PvP combination proportion of the Destiny 2 community. As players continue to savagely consume the new Gambit content, Bungie must surely struggle.
Good news, everyone!
The solution here is comparatively quite simple. Frog. Yeah, this is a topic that I think doesn't actually require much, quote unquote, in-depth analysis, because the solution is a straightforward one. People just want to shoot new things. I realize that the development costs for Bungie to create an entire new race and implement them in the universe, both gameplay and lore-wise, is probably pretty huge when compared to, the expected impact they would have on the player experience. I mean, us just having a bunch of new red bars to absolutely shit on will not really make the game better per se, but it for sure will sell expansions and trick our smooth gamer brains into thinking
Bungie have fixed the game!
a new cluster of enemies, a new race, will for sure help garner more interest in the game again and make the storyline post the Light and Dark saga just feel a bit more fresh. Also, I would give Bungie huge kudos if they went ahead and introduced alien frog enemies. Frog. That would be sick. I mean, as it stands, 2 out of the 4 enemy races we began the franchise with are currently fighting alongside us. We're also sort of creating a link with the Hive and Savathun in the current season storyline, so maybe they're about to hop on board too. And Bungie have also stated that the Vex will be kind of dealt with in the episodic content post the final shape. Therefore, it stands to reason that we need a new enemy race. The Witness arrived with Tormentors and we're soon going to face off against the Subjugators, but they don't really feel like a race. They're more of a twisted extension of the Witness, a sort of expression of whatever stuff she's got. He, they, I don't know, whatever they've got going on. I would love to see a brand new alien species come into play with no motives, no visual art style, and some new gameplay mechanics for us to just bite into. Fingers crossed the episodes announced will kind of wrap up our time in Sol and all the dealings we have with whatever enemies currently remain at that time. I sincerely hope Bungie also shares these opinions, because I for one am not looking forward to popping thrall heads for another 10 years. Given Bungie's demonstrated history of creating awesome enemies, I think it's a pretty safe bet that they can do this again in the next leg of Destiny 2. Okay, this one is a little broader in scope compared to the others. It's something that's not always easy to kind of pinpoint, but after you've played a game for a certain amount of time, in this case over a decade, it starts to feel a little stale. And by it, I mean the game's foundation. I, for one, am a little worn out from some of the moment-to-moment repetitions we perform outside of combat in Destiny. The little things that we do all the time, but nobody would really associate them with Destiny 2. But the reality is you probably interact with them even more than Destiny's actual content. And by this I mean the UI and the hub spaces. The tools that we use to engage with our weekly challenges, our seasonal content, our raid, our dungeon, our settings, our PvP matches, our gambit. Everything. I've been working in video game QA for about 3 years now, and I would say the most dramatic shift in my perspective that I experienced since working in the industry is that the UI, having a solid UI, is one of the most important aspects of a game. And not just having a solid UI, but having a fresh, iterative UI. Having to look at game UI systems and design critically for a living caused me to become extremely irritated by poor layouts, clunky transitions, clumsy designs, or God forbid a complex inventory manager with little or no organizational tools. Destiny 2 by no means has a bad UI. In fact, I would say for a large proportion of players it's quite strong, but the demographic of whose UI this is suitable for and who it is not is super important. If you're like me and you've been interacting with Destiny since its inception, all the micro changes, adjustments, inclusions to the UI probably went largely unnoticed to you. But for the players who've just decided to jump into Destiny right now, I can only imagine the nightmare. Side note here, I decided not to mention the need for an entirely new light system in the game, because I feel like it's been mentioned elsewhere so often that it doesn't need any more repetition. The spreading out of important pages and features all over the destination and the journey/player inventory tabs, the need to constantly wander between vendors, NPCs, holoprojectors, voice recordings, just to progress basic dialogue steps in the mainline quests, the ridiculousness of some seasonal activity progression steps, or the likewise ridiculous repetition and overuse of this 3x6 square upgrade system in the past, overcomplication of new features such as transmog that literally had to be nerfed after complaints for how unnecessarily complex they were. This UI and player interaction system is perfectly usable for experienced players who've been here since the start, but for new players, it just doesn't facilitate them. Next up is the hub spaces, aka the tower. Now, I actually like the tower for a social space. It was pretty cool. Maybe a little too big for its own good, with not enough vendors to fill up the space, but it was perfectly functional, and at this stage, for me at least, it's pretty iconic. I distinctly remember finishing the Destiny 2 vanilla campaign, spoiler free, and realizing at the end that the developers had secretly included a new hub space in place of the old tower for us. Although this was kind of a death sentence for the farm, which was charming in its own way. RIP, brother. It has been many years since then, and with countless visits to the same space in basically every session of the game I've had, I'm kind of ready just for something new. Now, I realize they did include the Helm at some point recently to take over seasonal activities largely, and while it was new and it did kind of serve its purpose as this fresh coat of paint that I'm proposing, it also kind of further deteriorated the usefulness and efficiency of using the tower as a space. A new unified space would provide Bungie with a chance to give players a fresh coat of paint to splurge their time in, and also just allow developers to tidy up the hub a little bit. Make all the important vendors within walking distance. Remove the need to travel to another destination for seasonal purposes. I mean, why could this not have just been in the tower hangar. It's free real estate, for example. Create more fun social interactions for players in the same session. Football, that was awesome. Tailor the experience towards new players so they can learn the important points of interest naturally in a space that, you know, we're all being introduced to without just blindly following objective markers like in the new light system. This point is kind of vague, a little generalized, but it doesn't diminish the importance of it in my opinion. Bungie not only now have to worry about incentivizing players with new, expanded upon content to play, they also need to ensure that the current and, you know, looking forward, what will eventually be the old content does not become just stale beyond repair. And you need to ensure players are engaging with the whole package, not just the new stuff. Okay, probably one of the most contentious topics in the Destoverse at the moment.
TM.
Do we need leveling anymore? Destiny has traditionally required its player base to grind out at a leveling system with each release, be it major or minor. While that certainly made sense at the beginning of the series, as time dragged on, questions began to surface about the need for such a roadblock, and players who were just simply going through the motions at this point had perfected the grind as much as was possible when, you know, RNG is a thing. Bounty hoarding, triple character flow over strats, and the pinnacle cheesing have all kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of importance these past few years, but they just kind of undermine the fun factor in level grinding, in my opinion. Going all the way back to Destiny 1 Year 1, the slow transition from white to green to blue to purple and eventually to yellow tier gear was just super exciting. Seeing your powers and abilities peak when you entered the legendary drop territory was really exciting. And it was cool to start kind of bragging that, yeah, no, I just get legendary gear now, it's pretty cool. And like nothing, straight up nothing will replace the hype I felt in year 1 when I got my first exotic drop in an activity. It was the Invective shotgun. It's awesome. Still remember it to this day. Nowadays, today, white, green and blue engrams are basically extinct. Legendary engrams are now just synonymous with drops in general because, you know, that's all the drops. And personally, I'm just swimming in exotic engrams with the recent changes. They have zero importance to me. I have to literally clear them out of my engram inventory, whatever you want to call it. I have no attachment to them. Maybe if I'm looking to some really specific armor stat build, I might, you know, feel the need to use them, but they may as well be a legendary drop at this point. Why do we need levels anymore if they are not even really tied to gear progression and the advancement of the player power fantasy? The most commonly hurled responses you'll hear regarding this topic are generally that, you know, we need difficulty in the game and we need a reason to stick to the game. We need a reason to be stuck in this gameplay loop. I mean, regarding difficulty, there's probably an argument that locking players out of activities due to power level deficiencies was beneficial to the health of the game at one point, and maybe there's valid criticism to be hurled at Bungie for kind of nonchalantly removing one of the core aspects of their game entirely from the game without really any major discussion with the community. However, in my opinion, this leveling system presented players with a luck-based artificial difficulty applicator that created uneven ground in the somewhat competitive PvE scene, particularly when it came to World's First Raids. No matter how good you were at Destiny 2, back in the day, you could just get screwed out of loot in a week 1 grind towards being raid ready and were no longer as competitive. Now, I'm by no means a competitive PvE player, and to be honest, my raiding days have been behind me for some time now, but I am still invested in watching the community who excel here, and I really like to just watch World First Raids and see what the strategies are, how the teams are composed, etc. And I think this newer contest difficulty mode Bungie is opting for in place of power leveling, in my opinion, it's done wonders for the health of the game, at least for now. I think it is a necessary experiment to check if the game can handle the loss of power leveling and whether player numbers will be retained without this artificial grind in place. But regardless, there's going to be a significant proportion of the community who adhere to these grinding levels once a year. People who come back once a year, grind the hell out of the game, complete the raid or whatever significant piece of content is being released, and just dip out until the next expansion. With the removal of power levels, what the removal of power levels means for this group remains to be seen. But I believe Bungie has made the right decision in at least testing it for now. Checking it out, seeing how everyone responds. It should leave us at least in an informed position on the lead up to the final shape, and perhaps over the next year, what's the most healthy difficulty leveling technique that can be identified and put in place for future expansions, with all facets of the community in mind. By no means is this an easy topic for Bungie to handle, as it requires altering one of the core aspects, not just of Destiny, but of the looter genre in general. So, all we can do now is let's keep an eye on things over the next few seasons and in the final shape and just see how Bungie handle it. Is leveling necessary? Just remove that thing, when you're going into an activity or at the end of an activity and it's about to end, and you're looking through your inventory, your rewards, your character, your menu, and it keeps cutting you back into the game, and it's really annoying because you want to just look at your menu and check things, and then it does it like 2 or 3 times in a row, like the loading in, the dialogue, and some other bull happens, and it just keeps putting you back out of the menu, and you're like opening it, and it's just really annoying. So honestly, yeah, if they could just fix that, that'd be great. Thanks.